Welcome. You are now listening to the Soul Mechanics podcast. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/soulmapping.life or Instagram soulmapping_life. With your host and personal guides, Aeon and Sophia. Sit back and enjoy as they tune you into practical wisdom for the art of being human. For more in-depth guidance and resources on your personal journey, check out our offerings at soulmapping.life. And now, for those that wish to thrive and prosper living their soul's purpose as spiritual entrepreneurs, check out our brand new soul actualization project at soulmapping.life/actualize.
What's going on, everybody? This is Danielle, and welcome to Soul Mechanics Radio episode number 1, where we'll be talking about archetypal languages, light codes, a lot of different spiritual technologies that you can integrate into your life.
Yeah, and I'm your co-host, Aeon, and really looking forward to this first episode here. So I also want to give a shout out to Lucid Vibe Radio for giving us a slot here. We're really stoked for the future, and just to be here and everything we have to share with you guys. And we want to thank them for providing this awesome platform to transmit these codes to you guys.
Yeah, awesome. And we are really excited to share a lot of stuff with you today. So, Tom, why don't you tell us, what are we going to talk about in this first episode?
Yeah, sure. So, Soul Mechanics as a station is going to be a synthesis of a lot of different tools, tips, and techniques. We want to give you guys practical wisdom for the art of being human. And what that entails is, a synthesis of many different systems and information, basically. So in order to really give you guys the best of ourselves and the best of this information, we're starting with a foundation in what we call light languages, light codes, or archetypal languages. And these languages essentially provide the foundation so that all of these systems can come together, and it will allow you to better understand what it is we're talking about in the future. And this is really kind of like the foundation of a lot of the future stuff that we're going to be getting into on the show.
Yeah, definitely. And just so you guys know a little bit about our backgrounds and, what we've been studying and working with and what we do with our life's work now. For me personally, I have an extensive background in psychology and, a lot of kind of self-help work, from communication to emotional intelligence and trauma healing, shadow work, and then also the esoteric sciences of astrology, human design, Richard Rudd's system of the gene keys, the I Ching. And we'll be synthesizing a lot of these different things to bring you, some really profound stuff that we've been experiencing ourselves that we feel will really help you throughout your life and just bring more clarity to being your authentic self.
Yeah, exactly. And a little bit about myself. So basically, since a young age, really, I was kind of like initiated onto the mystical path. Started out first with a heavy interest in like Carlos Castaneda, and then getting into things like Terence McKenna and Alan Watt, esoteric Buddhism. So I've had many years of studying various esoteric mystical traditions. And then more lately, over the past few years, I've gotten more into holistic medicine and how that works in an alchemical way in the human body. And then also a lot of things with like business and prosperity consciousness. But also synthesizing all of these same languages that Danielle was talking about, like astrology and human design, gene keys. And really, I come a little bit more from the mystical, but also the physical kind of scientific, where Danielle comes more from the spiritual, mental, emotional side of things. So we're hoping to gnostically kind of weave together a beautiful mixture of all of this for you guys.
Well, maybe we can talk about, why this is needed right now. So much is going on in the evolution of our species, and, we're going through mutation collectively. Things are moving faster. We're feeling more things in our body, being more sensitive. A lot of people are becoming more and more sensitive. So maybe we can explain to them why and how some of these systems are really helpful and why it's needed. These different languages.
The first thing that comes to mind when I think of why these languages are needed, I remember one of the first times I was listening to Terence McKenna, and he was talking about how in order for us to create a new world, that it would have to start with a new language, because essentially everything that we see around us is made out of language when we get right down to it on kind of like a quantum level. And even when we get into our DNA, when you see these strings of DNA structures within the body, you see all the composition of all these different strings of letters and things like that. And so for us to really build this new world that we all kind of like feel coming, it's going to start with a foundation in having a new language to basically tap into these new planes of reality and co-create them together.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you're saying is language can also be seen as like energy or information or data. So we're learning the language of energy, the language of the universe, how to decipher and really orient ourselves into our particular space, because each person has an individuated space while being, connected to the whole. So a lot of this too is about being sovereign and using these languages to understand kind of what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you go to another country or something, right, and you're there with these different people and you have no idea of the language, it's going to be so hard to navigate that reality. We have a lot of experience in that. We've, done quite a bit of world travel, and in order for us to move in those environments, we have to know what things are called and how to speak about them, so we can engage in creating or just going through life with these people that speak this other language.
It releases a lot of the limitations, or if you go there and you don't know the language, you can still move around, but you're going to be pretty limited.
Yeah, exactly. And, and then if we go one step further and deeper into this, we can look at everything that's happening to us in one way or another as communication, whether it's, a chemical, hormonal communication between two people or two things in the environment, or it's just a matter of, as we look around in the world, if we want to take in new and different types of information, we have to have a way to understand it and explain it, to be able to then work with it and engage with it.
Yeah, it's like you can see the world through all these different filters, all these different perspectives that bring further meaning, and help you to understand actually what the energy is trying to do, because there's energy in the universe that is going in its particular way.
Yeah.
And we can either go against it and have a lot of suffering and a lot of perceived resistance, or we can see where it's going, see where we're being guided, and kind of listen to the energy that way to help it guide us as well. Because it's all a reflection of our internal truest purpose anyways.
Exactly. And so these languages provide just a common foundation for us to speak about aspects of ourselves and connect with aspects of ourselves that we may have lost touch with. And what this is really doing is both bridging, again, our mind or our personality, our, everyday kind of ego consciousness, to allow us to experience separation. And this starts to reconnect us with this new language to, our heart or our body or nature. And then it goes from there and extends out to connecting with each other, right? So this new language is giving us a way to communicate things that we always felt and we may have kind of perceived before, but the more we give it this new language, it starts to kind of solidify it. And I have these new feelings coming up in my body more and more over the past few years, and as my nervous system is growing and changing and mutating, and I'm experiencing new things and feelings within my body. I need a way to properly communicate what's going on with the people around me. Like, hey, so there's this energy, it's feeling like struggle. And this is an example of why these languages are so important. And beyond that, they also depersonalize things, right?
Yeah.
So we've been experiencing a lot of that more and more lately, right?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from, collectively, especially when you think of the human design cosmology, which we'll be getting into more and more, but, the collective process is really currently processing out the mental plane, and we are developing the collective ajna center, which really correlates to the mind, okay? So a lot of this stuff is about handing over the control and power that you have within you to your form consciousness, So all of these languages help us to put the mind in the passenger seat of your vehicle and allow the form consciousness to drive us in the way that, we are intended to go and to evolve and adapt in that way. Whereas, like, the mind, it's a great tool, and we'll see as we go how important it is. One of the things that it's always doing is comparing and judging, and because that's the mechanism. It's the this or the that, the good or the bad. However it comes up in different situations. So, it makes it really hard to make decisions with the mind in our lives, even though a lot of us do try to use a lot of logic to make our own decisions. I'm not saying don't do that, but we're learning to listen to the energy of the universe and allowing the mind to be more of an observer. And this is one of the deepest spiritual practices you can have, is to fully embrace and accept yourself, which is this form consciousness, and allow the mind to be like the child, or the passenger, or the witness, but not the driver of the situation. So we'll see how these languages help us to come more into alignment with that.
Yeah, exactly. And, one way that, just to kind of explain a little bit more of the mechanics of that and how they help us to come into alignment, a lot of the languages that we speak, generally, they tend to divide things into categories and all these, all these different things around us. And they divide things and separate things, which is okay. That's very useful for a lot of things. I'm not here to, badmouth our languages or anything like that. But these languages, archetypal languages, are like holistic languages. And what they do is they represent kind of like gestalts of consciousness. They represent holistic things that, as we learn these archetypes, they start to bridge the consciousness between, what we would call like the left brain logical and the right brain creative. They allow us to again see how we fit into holistic structures, bringing us back into kind of like a holistic living with nature and the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being more, connected to everything, because we always are connected to everything. And at the same time, holding your individuated, differentiated space, because each person does have a unique energy. We are different. We are unique, and we are all here to, embody our light. And the only way we can do that is if we're coming from our authentic selves and our authentic nature. So a lot of that too with bridging the gap between being a collective and a consciousness that's together. It's also, how do you hold your space? So that's where the tools of communication can come in, and learning about all of these languages help us to decipher what we need to communicate as well, because sometimes it's really important to communicate boundaries, for example, to communicate needs. How do we communicate our needs? How do we communicate our feelings in a good way, so that we're all being respectful of each person being completely different and having their own pathway and things like that, and working together to empower each other and uplift each other in that space, and respecting each person's unique path. So these languages really help with providing tools to identify where in your life either you're not drawing enough boundaries, or maybe you have too many, or if you feel like you're in a situation where you feel stuck, or whatever is going on in your life that you perceive as holding you back. It could potentially just be that you need to learn to communicate your needs and to move through the energy, and to come from the place of the form consciousness, as it's allowing you to go into a different space than maybe what your mind is trying to tell you need to do. So it's definitely a radical way of living. It takes a lot of trust.
Radical self-acceptance.
Yeah.
That's what we like to say.
Self-acceptance, and really moving through life by these energies and watching the magic that unfolds, because our mind tries to be in control, but the mind is not really connected to an energy or a fuel or a motor in your body. There's different centers, and it's similar to the chakras, that have different functions, and the mind is not actually directly connected to an energy source. So that's why sometimes it's really hard to take our thoughts or ideas or opinions or feelings and things like that and turn them into, something in the reality. Whereas if we're listening with these languages and we can interpret the field, which is kind of like the universe talking to us, we can see what things are actually going to manifest and allow them, basically just getting ourselves out of the way.
Somewhat like the mind is more like a mirror. That's why, a lot of different esoteric practices or traditions they talk about like the moon, or the mind is like the moon, right? Where it's like this reflector. And it's basically just allowing us to experience a reflection or a portion of the information and the consciousness that's coming in. So it's there to give us a beautiful show, like a mirror or a screen. We can sit there and watch these beautiful animations in these movies, but like, if the movie that you're watching was to try and actually like somehow come out of the screen and affect change in the environment, it wouldn't be able to, because it's a projection.
Right. Well, in the mind too, and this is like proven by science, and it's common knowledge, is that our mind is really a filter. So the movie that we're watching is only part of the information that we're receiving. Mm-hmm. So when we can kind of more ground down into the body and into the form and the vehicle consciousness that's receiving a lot of different things that we're not even like mentally aware of, we can actually have a better and more accurate indication of what's being called forth from us, and what our vehicles are really processing out. Because a lot of people have heard the term empath, and everybody really is an empath on certain levels. We receive a lot of different information. Everyone's kind of like a different kind of empath, where we are receiving a lot of energy. We're receiving, perhaps the feelings of others, even if they're not saying anything. That's kind of more the traditional definition, I would say, of an empath, is like emotional empathy, but there are all types of empaths. You could be an empath of other people's stress. You can be an empath of other people's thought processes, of people's motivations, their instincts, their health. Yeah, all of these things. So really learning to work with your strengths and what you're receiving, because just like a lot of emotional empaths feel, especially before they learn that they were an empath, they might feel, when they feel someone else's energy or feelings, that they start to identify that that is who they are. And where they could have used that as a tool, to give insight and gain wisdom, potential wisdom, into the other person or the energy that's coming through, and not identifying with what is not you, because we are all different. We receive and transmit different things. So that's why when you were saying radical self-acceptance, these languages help us to really, in the best way that it can, identify to the closest of its ability who we are, which is really, where are we? What is the space? What is the energy of who we are? With that, it's helping us to not only know where we are, but also what is not us. So sometimes people really focus in their life on, where am I going? What am I doing? What's my direction? What should I be doing? And a lot of it coming from the mind, because in our society, in today's society, we have a lot of programming, a lot of conditioning, a lot of stuff being thrown at us all the time, which can be overwhelming and, can throw us off our own energy, because we start comparing ourselves to others, especially with the, social media, and which is a great tool, but it's also leading people at times to a space of like confusion and into a path that may not be the most direct path for them. They're still learning lessons and things, but so radical acceptance is knowing about your energies and knowing what energies are coming in that are not you, so that you can, rather than identify with it and trying to make a decision based off of inconsistent energy, that it's giving you insight and that you don't have to act on it. It's just information that you can use to move you. Is this person really healthy for me? Is this situation really healthy for me? It might be really good for you. Or it might not be. So learning to decipher that and allowing all of these languages to help guide us, while we're tapping into our innermost authority, which is our inner space, our inner knowing, which comes from the culmination of all these energies that create, our space or who we are. Because we are the whole, but we also, each person is sitting at a different angle. So knowing these different arcs or these, angles, angels, these different energies that create our space is immensely helpful, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's so helpful, because it's kind of like, I got this vision the other day. I was doing some meditation, actually some of the first times I knowingly tapped into what some people call the Akashic records, or this kind of plane that starts with the primal material, or the prima materia that kind of everything else is created out of, and it showed me this vision of where, imagine this prima materia is like a liquid, or goo of some kind of magical liquid. And as we each emerge as a separate consciousness out of this liquid, it's kind of that liquid has a form, right? It has a shape and a pattern. If you haven't before looked into something called cymatics, right? And it's where this sound frequency plays through sand or liquid or things, and when this sound comes out, you get these beautiful different patterns depending on the hertz and the frequencies, right? So as we as individuals emerge out of the cosmic soup if you want to call it that, we have this pattern, right? We have this original pattern and blueprint. Our geometry. And then as we go forward through time, we move through this space and the structure kind of flowing and being altered and navigating around other geometries and other structures and just being fashioned and shaped and molded by change in time and alteration. But there's still this original kind of pattern that we kind of adhere to as like a base level, like soul consciousness or something.
Yeah, and that's our frequency. So
Exactly.
When people talk about you are frequency, everything is frequency, you can think about it as sound, you can think about it as light, you can think about it in these geometries and things like that. And a lot of these languages are about putting you into the center of your geometry. If you think of that specific, let's say, a shape, you're sitting in the center of it and being guided and really becoming the passenger, like we're talking about in it. And this is also something that people call like your energy signature, right? So if you've ever heard that term, it's your space, where is your energy signature in the whole? Where does it fit best, and the energy of the universe wants to flow in harmony. So all of these different pieces of information, all these different movements of energy that happen in life are helping to move us into where we fit correctly, which is how we can, what I call mine, like you're mining, you're processing and taking in information and mining something, right, with your geometry. Your geometry has a very specific and necessary purpose to the whole. So when we're all in alignment and we're coming into this space and letting ourselves be guided and being in the center of our vehicle, and we have the tools, in the truck of our vehicle to be able to communicate different things because we know what's happening with our geometry, then we can really flow through life in a different way and just allow this magic to unfold. And that's why Tom and I have studied, and we've been helping hundreds of people to really identify their space, which is their geometry, which we use all these tools to help people understand their charts, and also the psychology of their traumas, because all of us coming into this world, if you think about it, our energetic signature, we haven't always been in the right spaces. So there's been a lot of trauma to the vehicle and to the mind, and how do we work through that? So we've learned that by synthesizing all of these things, that we can really get a very clear picture of, okay, what's needed, what traumas do you need to address, because those are the things that are keeping you in patterns that are not good for you. How do you communicate now that you've, resolved your trauma? How do you reestablish and reorient your space? And, really, how do we uplift and respect other people's energies as well? So these tools are not only helpful for yourself and, knowing what to do with clarity, because the energy is guiding you and you have an internal knowing that you can tap into, but it's also really helpful for you to be an empowering, uplifting person to the people in your lives and helping them get back into their own alignment.
Yeah, definitely. That it's so interesting, this process of getting back into alignment. It's very much like if we look around at nature, and we look at how most creatures and plants and different things function within the environment, right? There's just kind of like these natural orders and cycles, and the flower. One kind of flower is not trying to be like a cactus, or
right.
The cactus is not trying to be a bee or a hummingbird or something, right? And it's because, and why is this? Is because the geometry, and then going from the geometry up to just like the actual chemical reactions taking place in this thing, they have a specific role in a key place in the environment, and these systems allow us to basically they give the mind something, because the mind really just has this completely reflective, unlimited nature to it. They give the mind something to go, oh wait, this is the way that the form that I'm in, the witness consciousness acts in, right? So all these cycles that are taking place within our body that then fractally emanate out all the way up to planets and galaxies. It's like, okay, this time of day, these chemicals and hormones are pumping in this certain way in my body, and that's going to interact like this, and that's going to interact with the people around me. In different vehicles, act in different ways. I mean, this is really, if you think about it in this way, is kind of obvious. Like if we look at people around us, they have different, things going on in their body. Like some people have access to more energy at certain times of the day than others,
Right. Yeah. And this brings me back to when I was talking about the collective processing out the ajna, right? And developing the mental plane, which really means coming to terms with what it means to be human and existing and all of that mental process. So, like you said, a lot of this is about, addressing the mind and giving the mind something to experiment with, because it's all an experiment. So, you have to experiment with your own geometry, your own fractal.
And have fun with it.
Yeah, and have fun with it. And so when we can really understand that the mind is kind of been the thing that needs to be addressed, we can understand that everything that is not the mind is always trying to be in alignment, is always trying to be in harmony. So when we give the mind something to do, like you were saying, and we give it these tools and processes and, specific strategies, nothing too complicated, but it can really kind of step aside, and the mind has to experience this for itself. It has to see, oh, well, if I do trust and I allow and I listen to the universe and realize that I'm not in control all the time, which we will address the you create your reality, because that is part of it. But, first, the part of you that creates the reality is the form. It's everything that's not the mind. The mind can be a tool. We can use it to, direct the focus and attention. And that is the part that when it's in alignment with the form, that's how you create your reality. So really a lot of this is addressing the mind, because if we weren't in this kind of mind sickness of a culture, which is necessary, it was necessary for us to kind of go to the depths of psychosis as a culture and learn to get ourselves out of the fear, and that's the part of the processing of the collective ajna. It's like we had to fall into fear collectively and into this chaos in order to rise above it and to realize that it's not necessary all the time to be in this state of I don't know what to do, where am I going, what's going on in the world, and all of these things. We can really start to use the mind as a great tool for others, because as we'll see in future episodes, our mind is something that really is a gift to humanity in order for all of us to be what is called an external authority or an outer authority to other people. Just like we are talking about nature and all of these energies, situations, basically everything that happens in your life can also be an external authority to you. And what you do is you tap into your internal authority when the external authority comes in, where all this information comes in. And if it resonates, and if you know how to tap into your internal authority, which people have different authorities, so we will be doing episodes on what those are like and how to find out what authority you have. But when you can tap into that, you can realize that you're always being guided, that you don't have to worry about the future. You don't have to worry about, well, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be famous, or I need to achieve this in order to have that. That's kind of the mind in its current state is very, not for everybody, but I'm talking about the collective society is it's all about having and doing, and it's not so much about being. Where if we really realized that our beingness and being in the energy if we realized how much, like how important that is and how much we would actually gain from that, humanity would be in a much better space.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of like what Danielle was talking about in this kind of, basically she was talking a little bit about how necessary this was, for things to happen the way they have in human evolution. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that. It's like, going from this mind-centered consciousness into a more solar plexus emotional-centered consciousness, right? And we look around at society, and basically, I mean, we can see the basically the, what do you call it? Like the effects, right? Mm-hmm. We can see like, okay, humanity has hit this point where mind consciousness has really hit this massive peak, right? Like in terms of like the production that we have going on, the proliferation of cities and all of these different things, because
really over objectified world.
Exactly.
It's like self is very separated from the whole with the mind, like you said, the division and
right. And we needed that because humanity as a species came from this point where it had to figure out how to survive on this planet. Whatever we feel the origins of this species are, like, we can tell that humans, generally speaking, we're set up differently than a lot of the different animals and that are on the earth. Like we're not as easily like enmeshed in super cold weather or super hot weather, or if you put us down in the middle of the jungle, like we have to adapt, right? In order to survive, we have to adapt in these unique ways, and humanity needed this mind-centered way of living to adapt and survive as a species, in order for it to really reach this level of how many humans are on the planet and how the species has now evolved and reconnected from one culture to another and grown and combined all these different genetics, right?
Yeah, and like I was saying a little bit earlier about the mutation, that's taking place. And, mutation is a sudden, like, quantum leap of change. So this is what's going on with humanity as a whole, and specifically what we're talking about with the mind and the mental plane and transferring or mutating over to the solar plexus. Or if you kind of want to think about it, like if we look at a cell, humanity has been very kind of nucleus-centered, nucleus-based, centralized kind of energy, where we've kind of desensitized away over the time of developing this mental plane. But reaching over to that solar plexus energy is going to take us from nucleus-centered into kind of like the cell membrane consciousness. So we're transferring energy and information to each other and working more collectively and realizing our connectedness. It's like our over-objectification of the world by going so deep, what some call the myth of the fall of man, is, where we kind of fell into this isolation from the universe. Like humanity kind of, we all, throughout the studies and science and things like that, kept trying to separate man from nature, man from God. It kind of created all of this objectification, and if you can't measure it, it's not real. All these type of energies.
It's just like how one human comes from its mother. Mm-hmm. Humanity as a whole kind of came from nature, right? It's that type of separation.
Yeah, so really it's kind of like we had to go through that deep separation, isolation, to realize again our connectedness. And that's what the solar plexus or cell membrane consciousness, this we're each individual cells, if we want to keep with this metaphor, but we're now communicating and through this cell membrane transferring energy, which is, if you kind of want to think about it like our aura, all these energies and bodies. A lot of different practices and spiritual philosophies talk about all the different bodies that we have. So we're realizing that all of these different energies that we have are communicating with other energies more. It's always been there, but the mind, because of its objectification and isolation and the evolution that humanity went through, the quote unquote fall of man and the rise of the technology, we're realizing that all of that information and language transference that has always been happening, and now we can use the mind to be the good passenger, and help decipher energies within each other,
Like expand consciousness.
Right. Yeah.
It's like literally taking in more and new types of information. Psychology and science calls it sensory gating, right? This is where basically, the filters of the mind open or close to more and more information. They talk about, like, if we didn't have this sensory gating, we basically wouldn't have any experience, because we would be experiencing everything all at one time, and it would just be an indiscernible mess. And these languages tune us in. They allow us to expand the sensory gating and the information we're taking in ways that is healthy, and that we can generally, like, handle. Some methods, there are many methods to expand the sensory gating, and these languages are an easy way to do that, and then in a way that allows us to translate what we're experiencing to other people. And that being said, I also want to, we kind of want to wrap up this episode talking a little bit about the practical applications of these languages. One example is, because we're talking about bridging the mind and the identity with form, or the individual with the collective, or with nature, these languages also are the way that, we can then go into the form consciousness, or the subconscious, or nature, whatever you want to call it, navigate inside those spaces, and also intentionally communicate to do things like healing, or to repair the wounds and see them in a new light, or to expand our consciousness, or to get our form, different levels of the organs and the chemicals and the DNA. We could basically communicate with these structures and ask them to express themselves in more healthy ways, in more alignment. And that's just one example. There are also new ways to communicate in our relationships. That's a huge way that these languages have been helpful for Danny and I, and our relationship as a couple.
Yeah, it's like you were saying earlier, really depersonalizing a lot of this stuff, because a lot of it's just energy, and it doesn't mean spiritual bypassing. That'll be another episode where we talk about that. But really, it's about, first recognizing what's coming in, and then, do you need to, like, communicate something? Is something encroaching on your energy signature? It's not healthy for you. Okay, you need to draw boundaries. So that's where a lot of this communication is coming in, but depersonalizing it, so it's not coming in a way that's like shaming, or guilting.
Blaming.
Yeah, it's more so in a way like, hey, this is happening, just so you're aware, and can we try to do this? That type of energy. And, most of the time when we can do that, and knowing what we know with all these systems and how the universe works, we all want everyone to be comfortable and happy. So when we can communicate in an effective way, a lot of the times the person is willing to, try to adjust, and if they're not, it's not really probably the healthiest thing. We have to take care of our vehicles, our energy signature, our geometry, the form, consciousness, and notice where the mind is kind of coming in and, taking us out of it. And so that's where a lot of people talk about, like, mindfulness. What are we paying attention to? Are we being conscious of where our mind is taking us? Are we listening to the form, which is in the now? So, the power of now, and like Eckhart Tolle, all these things really come together. So, Yeah, I mean, it's great. In our future episodes, we're going to just explore more about these different sciences and philosophies. And we really love to bridge as many and integrate as many practical and applicable, tools as we can to give people whatever they need at the time, because there's different tools for different situations. And, some may resonate more with you than others. So yeah, we feel that there's a lot of value in so much of what humanity has deciphered from the universe, from astrology and all these, communication techniques and everything.
Yeah, we'll be focusing, we'll be expanding on these languages, getting more in depth into the various languages, and then also be giving other tools that come along with this, plants that can help us work with the body and the form and its intelligence, tools like communication tools, consciousness tools.
Interactive workshops, readings, videos that you make. Tom makes a lot of awesome videos. And
prosperity consciousness, how, we can actually work with these laws of the universe and the mechanics of our soul to bring more prosperity and abundance. We also, we won't be having this every show, but some shows you can expect really cool guest speakers, as they come to us and they flow in. We want to bring you guys some really cool guests, perhaps experts on certain topics.
Yeah. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find our information and our websites and stuff?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to find more information about the work that we do and cool posts and blogs and things like that, you can go to soulmapping.life. And then if you want to find more information about some of the new formulas and organic tools that we're coming out with to help evolve you and experience a better, more enhanced life, you can go to theelixir.life. And of course, you can follow us on Facebook, Danielle Rodenroth or Thomas Salkowitz on Facebook.
Yep, and we also have a nonprofit called Hugs. So if you want to check out hugs.world, we're supporting and integrating a lot of different projects, and we want to bring this further out to all of us types people, the people that are trying to really do something new and different and build a better, more harmonious world. We want to offer all of these tools to help all of us create this new world that we know is coming to be.
Yeah, social benefit. We're trying to, doing our best to give back in so many different ways through our nonprofit. And we'd love you guys to keep tuning in. As a final note, I just want to share, one piece, last piece for you guys, and how this relates to what we call the quantum or the quantum intelligence, right? So I was speaking a little bit about how the languages that we were talking about allow us to communicate with the form or the subconscious or nature. And this is where we really get into the, you create your own reality, right? Because these languages allow us to basically imprint like seeds, informations and pattern into the quantum, right? And then as we release our attachment or our deep desire for whatever these changes or shifts are to happen, then the quantum field responds by starting to shift those things in those new and different ways.
Yeah, it's being the creator and the creation.
All at the same time.
Yeah, just which one is the creator? It's not always the mind.
Exactly. So that's our last bit for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning into Soul Mechanics. Yeah, and we hope to be with you all again for Soul Mechanics episode number 2.